I remember the sound before the pain. The creak of the wooden gate, the rustle of straw under boots, the laughter of men who'd never known hunger. They said my father sold 2 mules and 1 daughter in the same week. I was the daughter, and I fetched less. The sun was high that day, a merciless coin hanging over San Lirio's trading yard. The air smelled of sweat, tobacco, and something sour, the smell of being owned. They tied my wrist with the same rope they used for livestock. I stared at the dirt until it blurred, pretending I was somewhere else. Someplace quiet where no one said sold. But you can't pretend when the auctioneer calls your name. Strong arms, he said. Good for house or field, the men laughed again. A few stepped closer, inspecting me the way they'd check a mule's teeth. I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted copper. I thought of my mother, who used to say, "Keep your eyes down and your soul high." I kept one of those promises. Then the bidding began. It wasn't about me. It was about who could own a person and still sleep at night. The price rose, then faltered. One man shouted something cruel, another threw his hat in the dust. I stopped hearing them after that. I only remember a pause, long enough to make the air itself hold its breath. That's when I saw him. He stood apart from the crowd, hat low, arms folded. Not laughing. Not moving. Just watching. There was a stillness about him that didn't belong to this place. When he finally spoke, his voice cut through the noise like a knife sliding free of its sheath. "Twice that amount," he said. The yard went quiet. No one argued. The auctioneer blinked, then nodded, and just like that, I was sold again. This time to silence. He led me to his horse without a word. I didn't ask where we were going. Maybe I didn't care. Maybe part of me wanted to see if there was any corner of this country where a woman could breathe without asking permission. We rode for hours, past the dry riverbed, past the carcass of a wagon burned long ago. The wind carried the dust of all who'd come before, some buried, some forgotten. When night fell, he stopped by a narrow ridge and finally spoke. "Name?" "Mara," he nodded once. "You can rest in the barn tonight. House is locked. Trust takes time." I wanted to laugh, but my throat hurt. "Trust," I said, "is for people who haven't been sold." He didn't answer, just untied his horse and walked away. His footsteps faded into the dark like they belonged there. That night, lying on a pile of old hay, I listened to the coyotes cry and thought about the rope around my wrist earlier that day. My skin still burned where it had bitten in. I wondered what kind of man paid double to save a stranger, and why he looked at me as if he already knew my story. When dawn came, I found a tin cup of water outside the barn door, and a folded note weighted with a nail. "Works at the East Corral. You'll eat when the horses do. No kindness in it, but no cruelty either." That was new. As I walked toward the rising sun, the wind lifted the dust into gold. I told myself this was just another day, just another kind of cage. But deep down, something small and dangerous stirred. Maybe it was hope, or maybe it was the echo of my mother's voice, whispering that freedom doesn't always come from kindness. Sometimes it comes from someone who refuses to look away. Either way, I kept walking, and for the first time in a long time, no one followed. The first morning on his land smelled of horses, iron, and rain that never came. The corral stretched out like a wound stitched with barbed wire, and the sky was wide enough to swallow anyone who forgot who they were. Elias Ward didn't say much, only pointed to the broken fence post, then the hammer and nails. His gestures were spare, like everything else about him. The silence between us wasn't cruel. It was functional, as if he'd learned long ago that words cost too much. I worked until my palms bled. When he brought a bucket of water and set it near me, I thought it was for the horse. It wasn't. He didn't look at me when he said, "Drink." I did. The water was warm, dusty, and tasted like the first mercy I'd had in months. For the next few days, we spoke only when necessary. He told me what needed fixing, what not to touch, when to rest. At night, I returned to the barn and slept on the same pile of hay, though he'd cleared a room inside the house. "Not yet," I'd said when he offered it. He didn't ask why. He kept to himself, mending saddles, marking ledgers, feeding the horses before feeding himself. But there was something in the way he watched the horizon, like he was listening for something that never came. On the fourth evening, a storm built low and slow over the ridgeline. The sky darkened, and the air filled with the scent of electricity. I was bringing in the last bucket from the well when the wind tore it from my hands. One of the calves got loose, panicking at the thunder. Without thinking, I ran after it, barefoot, skirts heavy with mud. I caught its rope just as lightning cracked the sky open. The calf nearly dragged me down, hooves slipping. Then Elias was there, coat whipping, jaw set, reaching for the rope. Our hands met for the first time. "Let go," he said. "I've got it." He looked at me like he couldn't decide whether to scold or trust me. Then, with one clean motion, he steadied the calf and tied it off. His hand brushed mine once more when he took the rope. It was warm and calloused. Real. Rain started then. Thin, cold needles. He tilted his hat forward. "You'll freeze if you stay out." I almost told him I'd been colder before. Instead, I just followed him back toward the barn. Inside, the lamplight flickered over the wooden beams, and water dripped from my hair to the floor. He handed me an old blanket without a word. The fabric smelled faintly of smoke and cedar. "Why did you buy me?" I asked finally. The question had been waiting on my tongue since the auction yard. He kept his back to me as he wiped rain from his coat. "Didn't buy you," he said. "Paid to stop someone else from owning you." "That's the same thing." His shoulders stiffened. "No, one makes you property. The other makes you free." The words hit harder than the rain. I sat down on a feed crate, holding the blanket tight. Freedom. What a fragile foreign word. He turned then, eyes unreadable in the lamplight. "You'll stay here till you find what you're after, or till you can stand on your own. Either way, no one lays claim." I wanted to ask what he was after, but his face made me stop. There was too much loss in it, the kind that doesn't like being named. Later that night, I heard him outside, talking low to the horses. His voice was softer than I'd expected. I lay awake listening to the storm fade into silence, and for the first time, I didn't feel owned by the dark. I didn't feel safe either. Just seen, and that was dangerous in its own way. It's strange how silence can change its shape. At first it feels like a wall, then a room, then something almost like peace. By the second week, I'd stopped counting the days. Morning became a rhythm: fetch water, feed the horses, mend what the wind broke overnight. Elias never raised his voice. He didn't need to. He'd point once and I'd understand what needed doing. Maybe it was respect. Or maybe I just couldn't bear to disappoint someone who finally looked at me like I was human. He was always up before dawn, his shadow moving through the barn like a quiet ghost. The smell of coffee reached me before his footsteps did. Some mornings he'd leave a tin cup on the porch rail for me, steam curling in the cold air. No words. Just the cup, and the kind of silence that didn't hurt. One afternoon, I found his old journal on the workbench, open, pages marked with rough handwriting. I didn't mean to read it, but one line caught me. "The land doesn't forget who works it with good hands." I closed it carefully. Later, when he noticed, he only said, "You read?" "A little." He nodded, as if that settled something he'd been wondering about. The days stretched long, but not lonely. He taught me how to ride the old bay mare, said it was better than walking 2 miles for water every day. The first time I fell, he offered a hand but didn't pull me up. "You've got to do it yourself," he said. "Otherwise, you'll never trust the ground again." I got up on my own. And for the first time since San Lirio, I smiled without thinking about who might be watching. That evening, while the sun bled out behind the ridge, I cooked stew from the last of the potatoes and a piece of salt pork. The house smelled like something warm, like belonging. Elias came in, hat in hand, silent as ever. When I placed a bowl in front of him, he hesitated. "You didn't have to," he said. "I know." He sat down slowly, as if afraid the moment might break if he moved too fast. We ate without talking, spoons clinking softly against tin. Halfway through, he said, almost to himself, "Haven't had company at this table in years." I wanted to ask what happened to change that, but his eyes were fixed on the fire. There was grief there, old, quiet grief that had learned how to breathe. The next morning brought cold wind and low clouds. A calf had gone missing overnight. I followed its faint bleating down by the creek. The ground was slick, and before I could reach it, my boot slipped. I caught the rope but tumbled knee-deep into the water. The calf bawled until Elias appeared, rope in hand, coat flapping like a dark wing. "Stubborn," he muttered. I wasn't sure if he meant the calf or me. We wrestled the frightened thing back to dry ground, both of us covered in mud. For a moment, we just stood there breathing hard. He laughed, a quiet, startled sound that I didn't think he was capable of. "What's funny?" I asked. "Didn't think you'd fight harder than a ranch hand," I shrugged. "Didn't think you'd help." That made him smile, a small thing, but it reached his eyes. And something inside me softened. That night, as the fire burned low, he fixed the latch on the window near my cot. "Wind'll keep you up," he said. I wanted to thank him, but the words tangled in my throat. So I just nodded. Before leaving, he paused at the doorway. "You ever think about leaving?" "Every day," I said. "But lately, I don't rush it." He studied me for a long moment, then tipped his hat and left. When the door closed, I realized I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of the quiet. Not of tomorrow, because for the first time, the silence between us didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Peace never lasts long out here. It starts with small things. A look too long, a whisper carried on the wind. And before you know it, the whole town's decided who you are. I should have known better than to ride into San Lirio alone. Elias had gone early that morning to trade hay in the north fields, and I needed flour, lamp oil, and a new needle. Simple errands, harmless things. But the moment I tied the mare outside the general store, I felt it. That hush that means trouble's about to speak. Mrs. Lang, the storekeeper's wife, froze mid-sentence when she saw me. A man by the barrels leaned back, smirking. Someone muttered, "That's Ward's girl. Girl. Property again." By the time I reached the counter, the whispers had swelled into words. "He bought her, they say. Pays her in something other than wages. You can't expect decency from a half-blood and a widower." I kept my eyes on the ledger, hands steady even as my pulse beat like a drum in my ears. 2 pounds of flour, I said. 1 tin of oil, Mrs. Lang's mouth thinned. "We're short on supplies. Maybe come back another day." Her lie was neat, practiced. The shelf behind her sagged with flour sacks. I left the store empty-handed, every step heavier than the last. Outside, Clyde Joran leaned against a post, the same grin he'd worn at the auction yard curling his lip. "Well, look who's got herself a fine new master," he said. "Quiet one, that Ward. Bet he don't talk much when he's—" I didn't let him finish. The slap came before I knew I'd lifted my hand. It cracked through the still air, shocking even me. His face darkened. "You forget who bought you first?" My stomach turned. "You never owned me." He grabbed my arm, fingers digging hard enough to bruise. The hell I didn't. That's when I heard it, the low thud of hooves, then Elias's voice, calm but dangerous. "Let go of her." Clyde hesitated, but only for a moment. "This ain't your fight, Ward." Elias dismounted slow, eyes cold as the iron on his belt buckle. I paid to end that fight. The whole street had gone still. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Clyde spat in the dirt. "You think money makes her yours?" Elias looked at me then, not at him. "She's not anyone's." He said it like a truth carved in stone. But the town didn't hear the meaning. They heard only the scandal. By sunset, rumors galloped faster than any horse. They said I'd bewitched him, that he'd thrown away his honor for a woman who didn't belong. By nightfall, a rock shattered the front window of the cabin. Elias stood by the door, jaw tight. I gathered the shards with shaking hands. "Maybe I should leave," I whispered. He didn't answer right away. Just stared at the fire, shoulders drawn like a man bracing against rain. "You could," he said finally, "if that's what you want. It's not about what I want. Then what is it about?" I met his eyes, steady, hurt-searching. "It's about not being the reason someone else gets burned." He turned away, voice low. "You're not the reason. They are." But when he spoke again, it broke something inside me. "Still, maybe you should go." The words landed softer than a bullet, but they cut deeper. I packed before dawn. The sky was pale and empty, the world quiet enough to hear my own heart falter. He didn't come out to stop me. As I saddled the mare, the last thing I saw was his shadow behind the curtain, unmoving. The wind picked up as I rode away, carrying dust and the faint sound of glass still crunching underfoot. Maybe peace never lasts out here. But I hadn't expected it to vanish with just 3 words. "You should go." The road away from San Lirio was quiet enough to hear your own regrets whisper. I didn't know where I was going, just that I couldn't look back. The hills blurred into a haze of dust and memory. Every mile I rode, Elias's voice echoed in my head. "You should go." So I did. For 3 days, I traded sleep for distance, stopping only when the mare trembled under me. I found work at a way station cleaning lanterns, counting miles instead of dreams. The nights were the worst, when the world went still and I could almost hear the sound of him setting a cup on the porch rail, the faint click of his boots against the boards. I told myself I was free. But freedom, it turned out, can be a lonely country. The letter found me on a gray morning, tucked inside a saddlebag I hadn't touched in weeks. Someone had slipped it there while I was working. No name on the front, just the rough handwriting I knew too well. "Mara, the barn burned 2 nights after you left. No one hurt, but half the horses spooked and ran. Town says it was lightning. I know better. I fixed the roof anyway. Maybe fixing things is all I know how to do." I read it until the ink blurred with rain. He hadn't asked me to come back. But he didn't have to. The space between his lines said more than words ever could. That night, I packed. When I reached the ridge above his land, dawn was breaking, a thin gold seam between the clouds. The barn was half rebuilt, beams rising like bones against the light. Smoke curled from the chimney. Elias was there, hammer in hand, sleeves rolled, hair damp with sweat. He didn't see me at first. I just stood watching, the rhythm of the hammer, steady and sure, the way it had always been. When he finally turned, he froze. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then he set the hammer down slowly, like any sudden motion might scare me off again. "You came back." I swallowed. "I didn't mean to stay gone this long." He nodded once. "Didn't think you would." We stood in the kind of silence that has history in it. Then I said, "I heard about the fire." He looked at the blackened boards. "I lost half the barn, but not the land." His voice softened. "Or the reason I built it," my breath caught. "And what was that reason?" He stepped closer, eyes steady on mine. "To have something worth keeping." The wind moved between us, carrying the smell of pine and ash. I wanted to say 100 things, apology, gratitude, forgiveness, but all that came out was, "I'm not yours to keep." He smiled, faint and tired. "Didn't say you were. I just meant, you don't have to walk alone anymore." The words sank deep, the way seeds do when the ground's finally ready. By noon, we were both working side by side, rebuilding what had been lost. He never told me what really happened that night, who struck the match or why. Maybe he didn't know. Maybe it didn't matter. What mattered was the quiet rhythm between us, the kind that doesn't need forgiving because it's already healing. When the roof beam lifted into place, I looked at him and said, "You paid twice that day to set me free. You don't owe me another thing." He wiped the sweat from his brow. Maybe I wasn't buying freedom. Maybe I was buying a chance to make something right. The sun caught in his hair, the light soft and golden. I felt the ache in my chest ease, like something broken had been waiting for this moment to breathe again. As evening fell, we sat on the porch steps, watching the horses settle in the paddock. Smoke rose steady from the rebuilt barn. I leaned my head back, feeling the cool boards behind me. "Elias," I said quietly. "This place feels different," he nodded. "Because you're in it." The wind carried a warmth that wasn't just from the fire inside. It was from belonging, not the kind bought or begged for, but earned. And for the first time, I didn't feel like someone's property or someone's burden. I felt home.